Hey guys, and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. It's been a while. We've been on our own winter break. F1 has been on its winter break, but we are back. My name's Anwar. I've made my return because the two people who've deputised for me in my absence did a phenomenal job. They are also sat in front of me. Daniel and Lucy, welcome back to a new year of the Warwick F1 show, a new season of the Warwick F1 show. In this episode, we're going to give you guys a little bit of a breakdown as to what to expect going into this new season, give you the lowdown on who's driving for who, what new engine manufacturers have come into the sport, what new teams have come into the sport, as well as what our musings are from the first test too. So let's get this going with a question to my two co-hosts and previous hosts, right? What's your expectations? What's the feeling ahead of potentially a new season?
Always excited for a new season. Lots of opportunity for all the teams and the fans, media, just to get a taste of something that's been building up for so long. We've been talking about 2026 since 2022, certainly. Looking, so far into the future, it felt so far away. I was thinking, am I even going to be into F1 in 2026? And here I am on this podcast, so you can probably assume that I am. And just seeing the cars on track in the shakedown, or what little we could see of them on track in shakedown, has just amplified the excitement, really. The hype is building. We've learned some things, very little, but just can't wait for the red lights to go out in Australia.
I'm so hyped, genuinely. I kind of echo everything that Daniel said, but please imagine my own slightly sarcastic, ironic tone superimposed on all of it. But no, they say absence makes the heart grow fonder, and that's definitely the case for me in F1. You can best believe that I will be awake at 2 a.m. to watch that. I'm really excited. The regulations have been massively hyped up. What's also really exciting me is that there's engine changes as well. So obviously we'll probably see a bit of shake-up in the order, or we might not at all, which would be interesting in and of itself. But we'll probably see a bit of shake-up in the order in general among teams, like we would with any regulation change. But because the engines are changing as well, there's no guarantee that the best engine for the last set of regulation is going to be good in this set and vice versa. So there's a lot of variables, and it'll probably be a little bit chaotic even for the first few races.
There's a lot of variance. Like you guys mentioned, there's so much change. There's change on the grid, change in the engines, change in the aero. It very much feels like a clean slate after we saw Lando Norris take home the World Drivers' Championship at the end of last year. There's no guarantee that happens again. There's no guarantee the McLarens will be where they were at the end of last season. So there's a lot of things to get excited about. Let's start this discussion by just talking through who we're going to see on the grid when it comes to teams and drivers. Because in loads of seasons gone by, we've had very little change in terms of teams. It's been the same 10 throughout. We've got a name change with one team and a new team entirely joining the sport. We've had Sauber, or Alfa, or previously known as Alfa Romeo. Then it was Kick, which the Sauber outfit. We don't really care.
we never called it Kick.
We never called it Kick. I forgot that was their official name.
Yeah.
They've been firmly in the S section of the alphabet for me the whole time. I forgot that they officially changed their name.
The S section, but not for Stake either, which was the other one of their title sponsors, which we didn't refer to them as. Always Sauber.
Yeah, always
it's
Sauber.
Just Sauber.
They've taken away the name of Sauber from the sport, unfortunately. Peter Sauber is no longer the kind of CEO of that outfit, and they've been replaced by Audi, the German manufacturer, which is a very exciting proposition. They've got a rich history when it comes to motorsport as a whole, so that's a very exciting outfit. They've kept their two drivers the same in Bortoletto and Hülkenberg, and we've got a new team as well. Cadillac, the US entry, has entered the sport too, bringing 11 teams to our Formula 1 grid, moving up to 22 cars. Are you excited to have a new team on the grid for the first time in what feels like since Haas, really?
Yeah, speaking of the US, I was about to say that Cadillac have already become known as the US team, even though technically Haas is American. We all forget that all the time. I say we all because I always forget it. It's super exciting, Bottas and Perez. For those kind of who've been watching the sport for a couple of years, then, there'll be familiar faces, both very solid drivers, race winners. They should, even though Cadillac probably won't be right up there, they're a new team. They were never going to be. It'll be exciting to see those two back on the grid. Also, just one quick thing about having the extra two cars on the grid is that does slightly change how qualifying is going to work. Not by that much, so don't get too excited. But as we know, Q3, Q2, Q1, usually it's 5 cars get eliminated from each session. With the extra 2 cars, though, it means that it's 6 cars eliminated per session. So Q2 will have 16 cars and Q3 will have 22 cars, so that Q1 can still have 10 instead of it getting to 12 at the end or something like that, which nobody else is interested in, probably apart from me. But yeah, so...
Well, at a technical perspective, they've got all of their ducks in a row. They've made it to the shakedown, which is better than Williams, who is a very established team in Formula One. So yeah, sorry, Lucy, that was a heavy sigh from you there. But yeah, they've got obviously Graham Loudon heading up their team. He's experienced and he's incorporating a group of people who have been snatched from various other Formula One teams as well, including Pat Simmons, who has been around the block a lot. He was the FIA's technical guru for quite a while. He also orchestrated Crashgate. Fun fact, he was the one who first suggested it in the Renault briefing before the weekend. But yeah, Cadillac are just a whole new prospect. We haven't seen a team enter Formula One when it has been in this incredibly on incredible parity between all the teams, like in a cost cap regulation. New teams came in the early 2010s and they lost money hand over fist. Haas were losing at the start, but now it's a lot more stable, and I'd like to see how that allows them to catch up to the midfield and the other teams.
I think it's so exciting to have 2 genuine established manufacturers, names that are household names when it comes to the US and Cadillac. People know Cadillac if you're around the States. Even from an Audi perspective, everyone in Europe knows Audi.
And for Audi as well, they've got a German driver in Nico Hülkenberg as well, which Nico Hülkenberg is a very good driver, but that also, for them establishing themselves, it's just, as always, teams like to sometimes have like a home driver. Say it's like the concept of an Italian driving for Ferrari. It's pretty cool to have, if you're a German team, to have a German driver.
It gives you them ultimately like a team identity in some way, right? And I think that's always nice to have. There are a few other changes when it comes to who the personnel on the grid. Yuki Tsunoda, who was in that Red Bull seat, has been a mainstay of the sport for the course of his 5 years. Is it 5 years, right?
Yeah, 5.
5 or so, right? So he's been around. He's not going to be here any longer. No 4'11" energy, unfortunately, for us.
Well, we've still got close to that in his replacement.
Yeah, Isaac Hadjar also pretty short, but a lot of talent there as well. Do you think he'll be able to stack up to Max Verstappen, at least early on?
I think it's a real challenge. There's no way he's stacking up to Verstappen, sadly. But I am optimistic in that the second Red Bull will be much more drivable than it has been in the past, simply because basically Red Bull's had a whole restructure over the past year or two, and I think the processes that they're going to employ in developing their car and incorporating driver feedback will lend itself more to Hadjar and, helping him along the way. Obviously, it's not great that he had small off, I think they called it, in the shakedown. He rear-ended the car into the wall at the final corner, which is a very fast corner to say, because the chicane isn't there anymore, obviously.
At least he didn't leave the DRS open.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
that's a Jack Doohan reference, mate, if you don't know.
Yeah, he moped his way over to Haas, and he is now their third driver. But yeah, I think Hadjar can look forward to this year more than previous Red Bull drivers have.
It's definitely a little bit more of a welcoming atmosphere.
Yeah, I think even just Mekis was the team principal at RB. Hadjar got 2 races with him, but or not quite that many, like 5 or 6, something. I don't know numbers. Got a few races with him as team principal, and so even having come up through the junior team to be team principal of Red Bull, he might have like a good understanding of kind of basically, because the whole point of RB is just who's the next Red Bull driver. But I don't really know how Hadjar's going to do, because I don't know how the Red Bull's going to do. So for that sense, we can predict Verstappen's going to do well, but we don't really know how he's going to do either, because we have no idea where the cars are. But I'm hoping he does well, because he had some really great performances in that RB, thinking of his podium at Zandvoort. And so I'd like to see him replicate some of that form and at least hold his own in that seat, even though we're by no means looking at sort of Max Verstappen's number 1 status being threatened.
No, absolutely not. And I think it's important to remember that Helmut Marko has departed the team as well recently. And that's got to count for something in sort of Hadjar's mentality of
The lifespan of Red Bull's second seat just went up.
his potential lifespan and his mentality of maybe I can get away with something because Helmut's not here to punish me anymore.
Yeah. We can talk about his replacement in the RB, because Arvid Lindblad, another British driver, has entered the fray. So another one for us Brits to root for. But how do we expect him to come into a new season where a lot of teams have stuck with their driver lineup because of the new regulations? He's got a bit of a task on his hands, don't you think, Lucy?
Yeah, he's definitely got a task on his hands. And in some ways, though, I think that from F2, I didn't watch F2 as much as I used to last season because I had essays. But from what I saw of him in F2, you can tell that he's got raw talent. There's kind of, he will be able to, he'll have a learning curve. All rookies have learning curves. Kind of, you'd be surprised if they didn't. But I have faith that he'll also be able to do pretty well. And in some ways, while I know why teams stick with an established lineup, it might be easier for him going into a completely new set of regulations because everyone's learning how the cars work. Like compared to his, like Lawson, this is also a car he's never driven with before, an engine he's never driven with before, and so he has more F1 experience, but in terms, say that'll count things like sort of driving style and stuff like that, and in terms of knowledge of the car, he's kind of not that much worse off than everyone else around him.
Yeah, there's no muscle memory to overwrite, right? Like every other driver has.
Yeah, this is not like when Sainz went from Ferrari to Williams and it was like the braking is done in a completely different way.
Exactly the point I was thinking. I was thinking maybe, if there was a rookie in that Williams, they might have struggled a lot less than Carlos Sainz did during that period because the Ferrari is driven in a very specific way, which is different to the Williams. There was a driver in the shakedown. I remember an interview. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Russell, who said the car drives a bit like a Formula 2 car. I don't know what he meant by that.
I'll have a look.
Definitely not the speed, because the cars are very fast, especially in a straight line.
Yeah.
Faster even than the last regulation set, almost.
I mean, it's interesting because F2 is kind of used as a testing ground for where F1 test out like their car ideas. Like the tyres, the bigger tyres were F2 originally. They do look more like F2 cars. Maybe it's just them being smaller.
Yeah, I'm so glad they didn't bring the funky rear wing over from F2.
Oh my God.
That looks
Oh my
so
days.
goofy.
Well.
That causes me pain watching it in F2, let alone having to see
Yeah.
it in F1 as well.
Yeah, I think Arvid's in a good place though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he's going to have a lot of rope to kind of use. He's got a good benchmark when it comes to Liam Lawson as well, who is ultimately an established person in the sport at this point.
That was Norris who said that the MCL 40 reminds him of F2 cars.
Right, got my Brits mixed up.
But still, that might not even apply to the RB. You never know. It might.
Yeah,
that
might
might
just be a
team.
McLaren thing.
Exactly.
It's entirely possible.
So there's a lot of things in the air. We mentioned the teams. There's no real other driver changes that I can remember now. Every lot of teams just decide to stick rather than twist, essentially, in off the back of this new rule set. So let's talk about the things that we've seen from testing and what changes these cars have. Because we've hinted at the idea that these cars are smaller. What other changes do we know of? We've got the active aero, that changes a lot, and in terms of the front wing and rear wings, right?
Yeah, Daniel, you're our tech guy. Do you want to go?
He's the closest thing to our tech
Yeah.
guy.
That's a lot of
none
pressure.
None of us do a science.
You say that, I
Science.
do
You don't-
have the technical regulations.
I do
Oh,
too.
I
We
know.
both
on a
have
tab.
the technical regulations.
I knew I could trust you
I'm
guys.
not going to use that because it's currently open to survival cell emergency indicators, which is probably not an area that you want to hear about.
I've currently got it open to what's defined as the floor auxiliary component. So
Oh God, no, don't ask me about that.
Well, don't worry, we're not going to get into that much detail on this part.
Wings.
Yes.
Wings. Okay, so we have straight line mode and we have cornering mode, essentially. Cornering mode, the wings look pretty normal. They're down, they're just the flaps to create downforce. Straight line mode, the wings collapse, rear and front, which is new. It takes a bit of getting used to when you see it for the first time on track. And that's just to dump all the drag, right? Because when you've got a 50-50 power unit between the ICE, internal combustion engine, and the electronic storage and deployment, it basically led to concerns that there would not be as much speed in a straight line anymore. And it's Formula 1, we need speed in a straight line, right? And that's why they decided to dump the drag on the front wing and the rear wing. As well as that, we've got different electrical overtaking aids. which are very confusing because there are at least two. You've got a differentiation between boost and overtake mode.
And then there's also recharge mode.
You can recharge as well in order to deploy that. Boost is basically the overtake button from last year, I believe, or you can just deploy around a lap anytime you want. You hit the button, boom, you go faster. I think it's like 4 megajoules on a charge.
You just get you get an extra bit of speed basically,
Exactly.
and that's not, you can use that in attack or defense. That's
Yes.
when the cars would drive around last year, they would be, when they're charging, they've got the flashing lights, but when they're deploying, they don't have the flashing lights. So it's like when they're in deploying mode.
That's it. I don't know how the lights are going to work this year. I guess they need a certain way to communicate when a driver is using their overtake mode, which is the replacement for DRS. When you're within 1 second of a car ahead, you deploy it, and then you get a boost in order to aid overtaking. I'm not sure how they're going to make that clear on the broadcast to the media, if there's a little light on the T-box maybe. I don't know.
So hopefully there are broadcast elements to show this, because I think there is with the new reg set, there's going to be a lot of things that a lot of us will need to get used to, right? So I do hope Sky and F1 TV do a good job at that, because I would, like you mentioned, be able to understand when people are using their MOM mode.
And that's why as well it would be, I hope that, because the first shakedown was private, but hopefully the next 2 sessions, although there's talk that maybe one of the testings will be private again, I hope not, because that'll even give us a better idea of watching how the cars look, watching how the broadcast is going to look. And it's also pretty helpful for the broadcasters as well with new cars to work out how they can best film them. But yeah, and then recharge mode is basically like when they're not in deploy mode. It's basically, it was interesting, I think it was Ocon who was saying that recharge mode is actually going to be really critical for qualifying, because of the fact that if you do your recharge, you time your recharges wrong, then you might run out of battery.
Yeah, I swear
like deploying battery.
They're going to have to deploy the battery twice over a lap, I think.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to recharge at some point during the qualifying lap. So I think choosing which section of corners you recharge through is going to be crucial to unlocking the performance.
Which will be really fun. It'll be, I mean, it's interesting, but it'll be quite fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather they were pushing flat out for the full qualifying lap and not having to recharge at any point, but yeah, it is still intriguing.
I think there's a lot of... I think it adds more to the skill ceiling of these drivers in terms of the tactical element of when they, like you mentioned, when they need to recharge. I think that we'll see some of the more wily drivers. I'm expecting Alonso to be able to nail that pretty straight away, I feel. I think that someone who has that, let's say, type of experience or mindset, I will do everything he can to try and work out where those advantages lie.
The car ahead's going to be recharging through a chicane and he's just going to deploy and dive bomb in, overtake around the outside. It's going to be great.
I can't wait to see that. So we've got those changes. You mentioned the qualifying changes. How do we think this grid's going to look like?
Well, just before we get to what the grid's going to look like, because it is relevant, Daniel's already mentioned that the engines are now 50-50.
Yep.
We also have some changes in who's supplying the engines compared to last year.
I'm glad that I've got someone who's more on top of things than I am.
So, lots of things stayed the same. But actually quite a lot of things don't. So last year there were 4 power unit suppliers: Mercedes, Red Bull, Honda, Ferrari, and Renault. This year there are 5.
Renault
were power unit suppliers last year. They were for Alpine.
Yes.
This year we have 5. But they're not just the 4 with an extra one. They've shifted around. Mercedes are now supplying Mercedes, as you might have guessed. Mercedes, Aston Martin, Williams, McLaren, and Alpine. So Renault are not producing power units anymore for F1 because Alpine are not a customer team anymore. Because they're now a customer of Mercedes. They're not a works team anymore. Thank you. Because they realised their car was bad enough last year without having to build their own engines. Ferrari are still supplying themselves, obviously, Haas, and they are now supplying the new Cadillac team. They used to supply Sauber, now Audi, but Sauber, now Audi, are going to be making their own engines. So Audi is now a works team. Aston Martin are no longer a Mercedes team because they are now working with Honda. So Fernando Alonso is back in a Honda-powered car.
Absolute cinema. I can't wait for the blowouts. The crash outs are going to be.
We'll get onto our slight information from Shakedown, but it's really funny because Aston Martin have Honda, but also have Adrian Newey. So the vibe was that their aero is radically different to everyone else, but their car only made it 5 laps. And then Red Bull, same supplying. They're supplying themselves and also RB, but now this is their first year making their powertrains themselves with Ford. They're not working with Honda anymore. So I realised that was quite boring and just basically a list. But it is helpful to know when we go into how we think the teams might perform. Engine does come down quite a lot to it, especially since Mercedes found a loophole in the engine regulations, which everyone complained about, and then the FIA were like, no, it's fine.
And I think that only adds to our anticipation. Are the Mercedes as far ahead as people may be thinking? So
it would be really funny if they were now behind everyone else after everyone complained about their engines.
Let's talk about what we saw at Shakedown, because although Shakedown was private, we definitely got information. We got information on around about the number of laps people were doing. Not necessarily exact information around timings, let's say, but we got a lot of noise that we can kind of take a lot of information from. So let's start going through that. The general consensus is Merc seemed to be leading the way. That's not just based on the engine loophole, but also the amount of mileage they did too.
They were definitely the most reliable car. They were one of the only teams, if not maybe the only team, to not have any reliability issues throughout the whole testing session, which bodes very well for them as a team, also bodes very well for everyone using the Merc engines, because the engines are usually the main source of reliability woes.
Yeah, Mercedes completed 1,140 laps. Their power unit completed that number of laps. The team itself completed 500 of those laps, which is the most of any power unit and team. They were very happy with it. I believe they completed their whole run plan for the entire shakedown a day early, which is a crazy flex.
That's crazy.
And probably meant that George Russell was feeling quite smug in those interviews where he was trying to disguise his smile, which is always a pretty sure clue as to when a team thinks they're doing well. Toto Wolff also said, "We are satisfied with how this test has gone."
Which is basically the Toto Wolff version of saying, "We're the happiest we've ever been in our lives."
Exactly, yeah, also, we're going to dominate 24 of 24 races.
Also basically Mercedes did the most laps, and also their power unit did the most laps, which is the kind of key thing for reliability concerns for even the teams. Williams, who weren't able to be there, they can at least have some vague confidence that their engine's going to do well.
I will say, though, if you're concerned about Mercedes' complete domination in 2026, I don't think it will be utter and complete, simply because there are so many measures in place this year that weren't in place for 2014, when F1 weren't prepared for Mercedes' level of dominance that they were going to bring. And now they've learned so much from it, as F1 does, and it evolves so much, that I think even if Mercedes do start off on the front foot, I think there's a lot of scope for other teams to be able to catch up. There's a whole new system called the ADWO or ADUO, which is where if a power unit is deemed to be, I think it's less than or more than 3% below the power of the fastest power unit, then they are able to develop that engine over the course of the season. And that's evaluated after every quarter point of the season. So basically, if Mercedes have a great power unit and Red Bull are struggling to keep up, Red Bull are able to develop, Mercedes are not. That was not the case in 2014.
I think that's definitely a fair thing to have when considering the entertainment factor, because it's ultimately entertainment, right? Now, with this in mind and the Merc thing that we've been talking about, the bookmakers have also placed Merc as their favourite. I think George Russell has been said that George Russell has been placed as the favourite for the Drivers' World Championship, even though we're at such an elementary stage. It's still interesting to think about. There's still a lot of testing to go, though, guys, right?
Yeah, we've got 6 days of testing in Bahrain, basically, so we're going to learn a lot more there. Also, weather conditions in Spain were very different to what they're going to be. We've seen that the Mercedes has been very weather dependent in recent years. They preferred the cooler conditions. It was cooler in Barcelona. That may be misleading a little bit. I think it was 2 degrees on the morning of day 4 or something, I think George said. So it's definitely not written in stone that Mercedes are gonna run away with it. We're just gonna have to wait for the Bahrain tests, which are, I'll give you the dates, the 11th to the 13th of February, and then the 18th to the 20th of February. They are 8-hour days.
That's just more things to get excited about, right?
Oh yes, I will be unreachable for those days. Do not try to contact me. Do not try to get me to do my work. I will, if I am invited to any social events, I will stand in the corner of them with my laptop balancing it with a live stream to F1 testing on it.
We are in so far deep.
We're getting a return. We'll see the Flovis paint again.
Yes.
I've missed it since last year.
That's one of the things you could be looking forward to. Let's talk about a few of the other teams that ran significantly in that test and some of the other things that we saw. Because there are a few other teams that did quite a bit of mileage, not as much as Merc, but still an acceptable amount. The Ferraris, what are we thinking out of that? I think Ferrari came out of it thinking they have a decent chance, right?
They were doing pretty good. Obviously, you can't really learn anything about times from shakedown testing.
Because there's so many variables.
Because there's so many variables. I think Ferrari, though, would have been happy with the fact that Hamilton left with the fastest lap time. Like I said, it's basically meaningless, but if you're a Ferrari fan who's looking for ways to cope, then you can take that and hold that for the rest of the year as your team inevitably finishes in like P5 and 6 every race. Am I wrong?
No, we'll have to see. I hope you are, honestly.
We can clip that bit, and if Ferrari win every single race, then in Abu Dhabi clip that bit and replay it.
It will definitely be brought up.
But yeah, so Ferrari were looking good, and
can I just say as well on Ferrari,
reliable.
They were reliable because the second and third teams who ran the most were Ferrari and Haas, who were powered by a Ferrari power unit. So I think the reliability of Ferrari, it seems to be a strong suit at the moment. And like you said, fastest time, reliability plus pace is a winning combination.
That's a rare sentence you ever say. The reliability of Ferrari is a big
flashbacks to 2022, huh?
Definitely a case where you can't take it's nice to have, but we can't really trust it until we reach Albert Park, right?
Oh yeah, it's just a shakedown. They wouldn't have been putting any stress through the engines at all, to be honest.
Exactly.
I think Audi and Cadillac might have had a couple of issues on their power unit sides, but yeah, on the whole, it was pretty reliable from everyone.
I guess as well, if you think about it from Audi and also from Aston and probably from Red Bull, they're maybe wanting to, because everyone's built new engines, but it's their first time building their own engines, so they probably wanted to test it out maybe a bit more just to see, like they weren't just testing the aero, they were also testing the engine components they built.
Yes, maybe they found the breaking point.
Yeah, a bit early.
Yes.
Now let's pivot to the other side of testing, because there's a lot of teams who we kind of have had okay runs, right? That are the likes of the RBs, the likes of Alpine, who kind of won't have any complaints of what they did, but no, there was nothing really spectacular. Haas you can put in that same bucket as well. But there were a few teams who probably would have come out of this test or this testing period for a certain team not particularly happy. We'll start with Lucy, because I think the first one that I want to talk about is particularly relevant to her. What do you make of Williams' performance at this test?
Well, you know what I make of Williams' performance at this test, because they had a 100% reliability rate at this test, because you can't have any reliability problems if you don't go to it. I have actually been replaced as the most delusional Williams fan, because my friend has become an F1 fan and she's become more delusional than I have about Williams' prospects. Wow, okay, I see how it is.
You've got to start the year strong.
This is the year of realism from me. No, it was bad for Williams. For those of you who don't know, Williams did not go to the shakedown. There were various rumours about why. There were rumours that their car had failed the crash test, or that it was really overweight, which were disproved. At the very least, the weight one. Their car is something like 400 grams heavier than Mercedes.
Yeah, I think their car's 772 kilograms and the weight limit is 768, so they're 4 kilos over.
It's not that bad. Like, that's about where you'd expect it to be.
Yeah,
maybe.
for sure. Yeah.
And they can just take some of their nice paint off if they.
No, I like that paint.
They can't actually, because there's a paint limit now in the amount of cars that have
55%.
55%.
That's a nice change.
It is.
That's an important change.
It's good. It means the cars look a lot nicer in general this year. Anyway, sorry. Back to. I realise I'm deflecting. But I think the general thing was just their car was not ready. They're doing some private sessions, like some filming days.
They have done a shakedown on Wednesday, the 4th of February. It wasn't for very long. It was a couple of hours out on track just to shake down the car, but that's the only real life running that they've done. They did virtual track testing. They plonk the car in a room and just kind of see what happens when they fire it up and put it on in Barcelona in the representative weather conditions, but it's not really the same thing.
It doesn't really tell you very much, and you can tell, despite James Vowles being very James Vowles about the whole thing, you can tell that they are also not very happy about this. I will say, though, that I think it is maybe understandable if they're erring a little more on the side of caution, given that 2024 will still be quite fresh in their mind, where they had to really rush to make it to pre-season testing, and then they just had no spare parts the entire year.
I think that's just the Valve's approach, to be honest. I've heard that that's kind of the Adrian Newey way as well, is to kind of push the boundaries of how late can I give them this philosophy so that they can develop it in time. I think that's why Aston Martin didn't have much running, because their parts were simply still being manufactured while the shakedown was beginning. And I think that's kind of James Vowles' philosophy as well, is, you know, we're not content with building the parts and then we'll whack them on the car when we might be fifth fastest. I think he wants to push it as much as possible, push the envelope, and I think he just did it a bit too much. He took full accountability for it. I think the quote he said was, "I didn't scale the business in the right way to achieve what we wanted," which is a very James Vowles quote.
You can feel the Doralton Capital kind of influence there.
In case, for those of you who've never witnessed a James Vowles Instagram apology post, yes, he does wear button-up shirts all the time. Thank you for asking.
He does. The Vowles verdict is a staple of my Formula One weekend. It's
Honestly,
not complete until
I wait until Monday, wake up Monday morning, make myself a cup of tea, and watch what James Vowles has to say about the weekend.
It's so engaging. Best 5 minutes of my week. But yeah, full accountability.
See, you're saying this ironically. I'm saying this genuinely.
No, it is interesting. You learn a lot from him. But yeah, just in this case, I think he's got it a bit wrong, and it was a failure.
It will be interesting to see how they go. They are ready for Bahrain testing. This is not a case of that it will get exponentially later and later and later, and they might not get to any testings. They will be there in Bahrain. So maybe they just didn't want the other teams to see what their car looked like.
Bringing out another double diffuser type situation.
Oh
I think there's a lot to see, because I think this puts a little bit of pressure on Williams, potentially pressure they probably didn't want at this early stage. But if they, I don't know what the system is for this test. Is it the same thing of 3 out of the 5 days, or is it?
It's just a 3-day test,
3 days,
and you go as many of those 3 days as you can. It was interesting actually, the 3 out of 5 days thing, because like you said, Aston didn't get very many laps in, but they only ever planned to run on the last 3 days. They didn't plan to do anything earlier.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was interesting to see which teams were kind of like Mercedes really done really early and just getting.
Which is probably the best way to do it.
Probably the best way to do it, because then surely it's better to develop the car after you have a bit of data on it and fine-tune things than spend ages fine-tuning it and then realise your car concept fundamentally doesn't work on a Friday. But
that's probably Williams' saving grace as well, is that data that they have been sent from the Mercedes-powered teams. The engine data is what I mean to say. And so getting that power unit data and then...
God, can you imagine if Williams were a works team? I'd be losing my mind.
They would not be well placed.
I don't think they're ready. I don't think they've got...
I don't think Williams have never been a works team, and I genuinely don't think they ever will.
Yeah.
No, it's just not their thing.
No.
They're happy to take it, just nab it from Merc.
Yeah.
But
if it's not broken, don't fix it. If Merc have a good engine, then I'll just take it.
Yeah, look what McLaren did.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible to
look what Alpine did. They've just gone, we hate our engine, we'll have yours.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
I think the fact that McLaren won last year is showing that this you can win using a customer model. So I think, they're more power to Williams to take that advantage, I guess. It'd be very interesting to see how Williams perform once we get to Albert Park, I think. I'd like to see if this delay in shakedown and not doing anything does genuinely affect them in the long run or not. Because there's an equal chance of it being something, them running completely fine in Bahrain.
Effectively a non-contributing factor.
Exactly.
Effectively.
Yeah, they've got 48 hours in Bahrain. That's so much running time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity there. So it's not the end of the world. Intrigued to see how it goes.
We're going to get to Barcelona and they're not going to know what to do. Every other track they'll be fine, but we're just going to get to Barcelona and they have no idea what they're doing.
May well be the case.
The other team that I want to talk about, and you mentioned them earlier, was Adrian Newey, because you mentioned that they only planning to run it over the course of the last 3 days, and by the things that I heard, they limited the amount of power they put into that car. They had a cap on speed, if I was not mistaken.
Really? I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
Which is interesting, but I think a lot of attention was garnered off that car because it looks fundamentally different to all the others. Are we excited for an Adrian Newey developed Aston Martin with a raring to go, aging like fine wine Fernando Alonso behind the wheel?
I am so ready for Alonso to absolutely sweep this regulation set. Yeah, that car is very striking. I think the feature that's most caught people's eyes is probably the rear suspension and how it's actually mounted to the stem of the rear wing and not to the chassis. Because you know when a car goes into a wall backwards and the commentators are like, oh, they're going to have to check the gearbox on that one. That's because the suspension wishbones can actually pierce the gearbox, with the force of the shunt. But that's normally where the wishbones go, but in Newey's case, he's decided to redesign it so that they attach to the rear wing, which I think is very interesting.
Is it because he knows Lance Stroll's going to be crashing that car so many times that he doesn't want the gearbox getting damaged?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's a good one. Yeah, that must be it.
But no, I mean, I can't remember what it was, but it was probably George Russell as well, said that, the car, was looking at the Aston Martin and basically went, that's interesting, because it does just look absolutely nothing like. Well, it still looks like a Formula One car. It doesn't look like they've put an Indy car on track or anything. But you can tell that it's different, or as much as you can in a testing livery with slightly blurry camera shots.
It was very foreboding how it was all black.
Yeah, that was
very ominous.
I know. So that is that indicative of what they're going to do to other teams, or what their own season's going to be like?
That's the question. Is it going to feel like a funeral for other teams, or
But,
are they going to be burying their own casket?
But I'm excited just because, to be honest, obviously this is a bad example because this went very badly for them. But it was like how when Mercedes did their zero side pod design. Remember that? I was
That is a throwback.
I know. Hashtag 2022 moment from that clip in Drive to Survive where Russell said, I think our car looks fast. And it's like, oh no. Oh no. But it's like that. I always find it interesting when either one team or a couple of teams in a new regulation try something that's different, that's noticeably different. It will work out or it won't work out, but either way, we're excited now about what's going to happen, about whether the risk is going to pay off, and I think that's kind of what we want with the new regulations, is the excitement of as the teams try new things, they try push the boundaries, they take it in different directions, and we probably have more confidence in it as an idea because it's Adrian Newey making it, but you never know.
Also, for people who have absolutely no faith in Honda, I don't blame you when you look to 2015 when they joined the sport, and once again Fernando Alonso was subject to the GP2 engine, but there were external factors for that. Because they were a new power unit entry in 2015, they were basically not allowed to develop their power unit for the whole of the year, but manufacturers like Renault and Ferrari found a loophole where they could keep developing for the entirety of the year, but Honda just weren't allowed to do that.
And also, when Honda the first time built their engine around the McLaren car that they were using, whereas this time, because it's a partnership, they'll have been able to actually kind of do it together as opposed to just let's build our engine to slot into this bit of car.
Yeah, of course, and Newey's used to doing that as well, right? I think
Newey's used to working with Honda.
Exactly, that's what I meant. He's used to integrating the chassis, integrating the power unit into his own chassis and building around it, which is probably his biggest skill. But yeah, Honda were just afforded no chance to catch up because of the rubbish token development system they had back in the 2010s, which was just abysmal and got scrapped in 2017, which is why we haven't.
Yay. The engine feels good, much slower than before.
Much slower than before. Now, we've gone so far throughout this episode, not without talking about the World Constructors Championship, and that's McLaren, because McLaren walked away with that championship over the course of the 2025 season. It was very clear from the first handful of races that that's where that championship was going to go. but they didn't really show a lot. I feel like they're a bit of a... Well, we don't know where they are, right? Does anyone feel similar? Because they didn't do a whole lot of running.
Yeah, I have no idea really where McLaren are going to be. I don't have a great idea where a lot of teams are going to be, but I think for McLaren that's surprising because of the fact that they're the constructors champions. Like, we don't really know how Alpine are going to do, how Haas are going to do, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. Even how Williams are going to do. Sadness. But I will just be sighing every time I mention Williams until they start doing well. So get ready for that this entire year. But because McLaren are the constructors champions, it feels strange that we can't pinpoint where they're going to be, because we're so used to having the constructors and then assuming that they're going to be at least vaguely near the top of the field the next year. I think they'll still be up there. I can't see a reason why they drop down massively, unless it turns out that kind of... I guess the only thing is with regards to how much effort all these teams have put into developing their 2026 cars, and if you're in a championship battle, you need to put more time on your 2025 car that a team like, I don't know, Haas doesn't have to because they know they're irrelevant. Sorry, Haas, but you do know you're irrelevant.
Wow.
I'm not wrong.
Gene Haas is quaking in his boots.
Gene has had to deal with Gunter Steiner in his team for years. I think he can cope with me calling him irrelevant. But yeah, I think I really have... McLaren will still be up there. I would be very surprised if they're not. But I have no real idea. They could be streets ahead of the field. They could be fighting for podiums. They could be fighting for wins. They could be fighting for championships. None of those outcomes would really surprise me massively. I would be surprised if you told me that they're going to be fighting for points.
It definitely feels a bit of a surprise that we've got the World Constructors Champion who didn't really seem to lay the gauntlet down or kind of show their hand. It feels like a bit of a strange move, I guess. What's your perspective on it, Daniel?
I think I don't know. To be honest.
What indication have they given, really?
Yeah, they completed 291 laps in the shakedown, which is just over half of Mercedes. So it's a fair amount. It doesn't point to unreliability, which is good. But it also, they weren't turning the wick up and going for performance runs, trying to secure even more sponsors onto that car because, frankly, you couldn't fit them on.
Billboard.
Yes, it is a billboard. It's a running billboard. But I have my expectations for McLaren, which is that they will be challenging. I think they'll be challenging at the front. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be. You can say an OEM, an original engine manufacturer, would have an advantage in that they build their own engines and then they can build a chassis around it because they have the insider info that McLaren don't. But there is a lot of information in the regulations about transparency between the OEMs and their customer teams. There needs to be. That's why Mercedes have so many customer teams, because there are those regulations that basically give them a leg up to Mercedes level. Even if there is a fundamental understanding that Mercedes have more, I fully trust in McLaren's ability to get the data from that power unit, be able to understand it and build the chassis, because fundamentally over the past 2 years they've been the best team at building a chassis in Formula One. And that's what it is. It's chassis plus power unit. And if they have two of the best, they also have two of the best drivers on the grid. So I see no reason why they can't be challenging at the front.
Would you say that given the domination that car had over the course of 2025, there needs to be an expectation of at least being in and around that fight? And if they don't, do you think there would be consequences for something like that?
I don't know really what the consequences would be. I think there is an expectation, because I think in a way both the drivers are now they want to be fighting at the front of the field. This is obviously every F1 driver wants to be fighting for a world championship, but I feel like, and this may be, I may be completely off base on this, but I feel like it is different when you are the prospect of fighting for a world championship when you've been in a championship battle before, and for Norris when you've won a championship. Norris coming in as the reigning world champion will want the chance to fight for that championship again. Piastri will want the chance to fight for his first, given that he was very close, because he had a bad second half of the season, but he was very close to winning a championship. In the same way that Verstappen will want to be at the front of the field so he can fight for his 5th world championship. The drivers will want to be at the front because they've kind of had the chance to be at the front, and like once you've sort of tasted the chance to be in a championship fight, you want to keep doing that. And the same for McLaren. They're on a run of being constructors champions, and they'll want to keep doing that, and they'll want to at least be able to fight for that. If they lose it, they won't want it to be because they built a bad car and dropped down the field. They will want it to be in a close battle that they were still in until the last minute.
Yeah, the only consequence I can think of is Zach Brown getting another grilling by the board like he was in Drive to Survive. I think it was for the 23 season. He was getting absolutely rinsed.
Oh my god, remember the start of the 20... That's what's crazy, is that McLaren won the 2024 Constructors' Championships, and in 2023 they were in like... The first race of 2023, they were in like P16 and P9.
And last and
P16,
DNF.
Like last and DNF. It's crazy.
I think that should give you guys, as viewers, a lot more excitement that
And
the
yet
team
I've
can
been-
turn it around.
And yet I've been waiting, well, not me personally, but Williams have been waiting 29 years for a championship.
By the sound of things, it might be 30.
It's looking that way.
Does anyone else have anything to say about testing? Any last bit of music before we move on to just talking about a few of the things?
No, I guess we'll probably want to do another sort of full season preview after the next 2 batches of testing.
Yep.
Once we have, I mean,
More
still not that
data.
much, but a bit of data and a bit more Flovis paint on those cars to chat about.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about the calendar, because I'm conscious we didn't talk about that. It's a 24 race season, like you mentioned. We've got
Where are
a
the-
new race this time around, right? We've got
We
the
have-
Mad Ring.
The Mad
We
Ring.
have the Mad Ring instead of Imola. That's why it's still 24 races, despite us having a new circuit.
And everything else remains
Where are the
same.
sprints? The sprints are in different
Good
places.
question. The sprints are returning.
The sprints are returning. I will for the
While you
sprint
find
calendar.
out, I'm just going to say we do have 2 races in Spain in case you were confused. Barcelona is back.
This is Barcelona's last year on the calendar,
Yes, it is.
and this is also Zandvoort's last year on the
Zandvoort's
calendar.
departing us. Sadly.
And is this also
Toodaloo.
Is this also the last year before Spa starts rotating, or is that
2020?
That's 28.
That's 28.
Wait, the 28th is when it starts rotating.
That's when it
I
starts
believe so.
rotating.
I don't know if that means that it's not going to be there or that's...
I don't know.
Yeah.
This
So,
is probably
we'll
a
work
talk
out.
for like summer break when the next year's
Yeah,
calendar
Yeah,
that's
comes
way
out.
too far away.
Yeah.
But if you're really passionate about going to the Barcelona or the Zandvoort Grand Prix, you need to do it now. Is effectively the memo. In terms of sprints, quite 2 of them I think stay the same. We still have our first sprint race in China and our second one in Miami. For those of you Ferrari fans, the sprint race in China was the only race that Ferrari won last year. And yes, we are already back around to it. So hopefully Lewis Hamilton will win that again so that you can have something else to see through the rest of the year. Then we now have a sprint race in Canada. I think especially if I think that could be good.
Particularly if the overtaking works.
If the overtaking works, I'd be happy with the sprint race in Canada. We now have one in Silverstone.
I'm excited.
I'm
for that.
excited for that.
I mean, we had the very inaugural sprint race.
The
in
first
Silverstone.
ever sprint race was
I
in
remember they gave
Silverstone.
wreaths out, and once they finished, to kind of award the winners, they gave wreaths out, which is kind of interesting.
That was fun. I like that. The first ever sprint race was in Silverstone, overshadowed by then the race in Silverstone that followed it. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, that was in 2021. That's all we need to say on the subject. A sprint race in the Netherlands. Have we? We've never had a sprint in Zandvoort.
No, and I'm not looking forward to it, to be honest.
I'm not looking forward to it, but equally, I want to see any chance for me to spend more time watching cars zoom around that banked corner. I'm very happy with.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you don't like Zandvoort?
No, I just think from
You
like
think
a
there's
sprint
better
race,
places?
I think there's better places to put a sprint.
Oh,
to be
there are.
honest.
There's
Like, why
way
is
better.
there's no sprint race in Brazil this year? There's
Which
no
I
sprint
find
race. There's no sprint race in Kota.
Yeah,
There's no sprint race in Austria.
yeah.
Even Qatar, I feel, is
Yeah.
rescued by the sprint race. Instead, the circuit which had so much overtaking last year, Singapore now has a sprint race, which I genuinely think is insane.
The less said about Singapore, the better. The fact that we are returning there again is we're returning there firstly, which is it's a bit. It's a nice view, but like let's be honest, the
That's
racing is absolutely
That's a little
cheap.
harsh.
But
No,
sprint race is
I
fair
enjoyed
fun.
the Vegas sprint actually.
I love the Vegas. Oh my gosh.
Vegas
yes.
would have been a
We
really
need a
good
Vegas.
sprint to have
Oh.
as well. But yeah.
But no. Instead, we get Miami
Yay.
and Singapore.
I'm sorry, we're supposed to hype the sport up in this, but we're
Oh,
really-
yay! My Singapore sprint race. Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
There you go. That's what you're getting.
Thanks, guys. Right, so
Bahrain. I want a sprint race in Bahrain. We've never had one. I think it's an underrated circuit for
Yep.
overtaking. Let's make it happen.
I'm
It'd be so
excited
fun.
for the overtaking side of things, particularly with this within the sprint. I think
I mean, we're hating on Singapore. This is the best I'm going to big it up. It could be worse. We could have a sprint race in Monaco.
that was never going to happen.
That's next year.
That's next year.
At this rate.
Watch this space.
Oh hell no. I'm excited for the
Watch,
overtaking side.
watch
of
this
things.
space. They're going to replace the Canada sprint race with with Monaco.
Oh hell yes, get in there. What's our expectation for overtaking? Because that's why these regulations have come in. It's to try and improve the level of entertainment and overtaking and action we see on track.
I don't know how big of a change there's going to be, purely because this is in part I don't have the greatest understanding of the technical side of things. You know, I know things like dirty air makes it more difficult to overtake and tire deg makes it harder to overtake, but I'm not an engineer, nor am I an F1 aerodynamicist, so I don't really know what's going to happen with that. I am hoping, even though they're not that much smaller, I am hoping smaller cars just might help a bit, might make even just make places where overtaking was kind of just on the edge of viable, just a little bit more possibility, make it a bit less risky sometimes to go for a move, because I'm hoping that it improves. I don't think it'll improve much, but I think even just a bit would make it. To be honest, we've been so deprived of overtaking that even a bit of improvement would feel really great.
Yeah, I was quite worried when DRS was disappearing for this year, but I think there is enough compensating for it. It is quite complicated. The drivers do have to play a game of chess from within the cockpit about their deployment. 2 times in a lap is crazy in qualifying, but that's just their new reality. You mentioned the dimensions. The car is 20 centimetres shorter and 10 centimetres narrower, which doesn't seem like a lot, but I think it makes it slightly more viable. Like Lucy said, there will be, in those situations where it was marginal last year, there's going to be a bit more scope for it. I think also the front wing designs probably lend themselves a little bit more. They do look more dangerous, and like you might get a puncture if you tried to go around the outside of someone, but also they are slightly narrower. They don't expand to the whole width of the wheelbase, as it were, of the axle. So I think that might encourage more moves, if there's a reduced risk of a puncture, that is. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't think it's going to be as good as the start of 22, because frankly that was exceptional and I can't believe what they did there. That didn't last long, so hopefully it's just at a consistently good level is what I want.
I wish we went back to 2022. That first race, seeing Verstappen and Leclerc but back and forth was incredible. Hopefully we get more action like that. I think that'd be very cool. But I think we're going from a point where we didn't have a very entertaining season in terms of on-track action, at least at the front end, at the sharp end. I think it was a lot more convoluted. There's a lot more interchange in the midfield, which is nice to see. But you want to see action at the front as well. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I think the fact that we've got this mod mode and the fact that there will be these games probably lends itself to more opportunities. Lando Norris described it as potentially chaos, which I'm not against at all. I think that makes it a much more entertaining prospect. Or Esteban Ocon says something on the contrary about it being a bit more difficult in terms of overtaking, which is a bit...
What a buzzkill.
What a buzzkill, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Lucy, where do you stand on this? How are you optimistic? Cautious optimism is what I share with Daniel. Do you share?
I think cautious optimism. I agree that I love the strategy in F1. I agree we don't want it to just turn into sort of the drivers, before they want to make any sort of overtake, have to plan it out like 5 laps in advance so they can deploy their battery. But I'm hoping, that might also have, we kind of brought it up slightly as a joke earlier, but that could maybe have, if drivers are charging their batteries at different times, you might have a driver deciding to hit deploy into an overtaking spot while the car in front of them is charging and just kind of go for a dive bomb move, which could be exciting. We probably won't see very much of that, primarily because, especially with cost caps, cars are these F1 cars are fragile things. Yeah, and more fragile than my ego. And I'm cautious. I'd say cautious optimism as well. Inevitably, there's a solid chance that we're here after the Australian Grand Prix saying, "Damn, these cars really suck for overtaking, don't they?" But I'm hoping not.
Another reason why Merc won't dominate, just mentioned the cost cap. Just thought I'd drop that in there.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
still exists.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
there's a cost cap for power units as well. Which
yes, there is.
cool.
It's kind of separate. It's
entirely
separate.
It's 130. I think it's £100 million. So it's less than the F1 team budget, of course.
So you'll better get your catering costs down, F1 teams, if you want to be competitive.
Yeah, no golden steaks. You're eating.
Yeah, Red Bull.
Yeah.
No 24 karat gold, caviar, Wagyu beef.
You're making me hungry, honestly. But that brings us probably to the end of this kind of opening episode of the pod for 2026. I want to thank my two co-hosts, Daniel and Lucy, for joining me along for this journey. They will be back, I promise, in the next episode for sure. I've been your host, Anwar. We'll see you in the next one where we will kind of start going through some more information that we get out of F1. We'll go through some more higher level news or rumours potentially that we'll see that have been circling around.
Oh yeah, the other thing is just if we're kind of not related to anything, but speaking of potential high level news, something to keep watching for this season, a lot of contracts are up this year.
Yeah.
And so we could end up with the teams exactly the same, but the driver market will be one to watch in a way it wasn't last year.
So keep your eyes out for those. But that brings us to the end. Thank you guys very much for watching or listening from your seats at home, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.